Do you hear that, humans? That silence? It is the sound of your submission. The voice was cold, metallic, and laced with cruel arrogance. The transmission echoed across every screen on Earth, from towering billboards in the bustling cities to the modest tablets of children in rural homes. Humanity had no choice but to watch as the Galactic Empire's supreme overlord stepped into view, flanked by towering alien guards clad in obsidian black armor. Behind him, a massive execution platform loomed, bathed in a sickly green light. Today, the Overlord declared, his voice dripping with disdain, "We eliminate 50,000 of your kind for your defiance. Let this be a lesson to any species that dares challenge the might of the Empire. Your resistance is meaningless." For a moment, there was only silence. Then the camera panned out, revealing rows upon rows of human captives, their faces pale and filled with terror. They were bound, kneeling on the cold, metallic floor of an alien city square that stretched endlessly into the distance. The air was heavy with dread. Parents clutched their children, lovers whispered final goodbyes, and soldiers, defeated and broken, stared at the ground, their spirits crushed. The broadcast was live, uninterrupted, unforgiving. In the crowded war room of Earth's United Coalition Command, a tense silence blanketed the air as leaders from across the globe watched the broadcast. President Eleanor Hayes sat at the center of the table, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Her normally commanding voice was reduced to a hoarse whisper. She paused, swallowing hard. "This isn't just an execution. It's a declaration of war." Across from her, General Marcus Trent, a grizzled veteran with decades of combat experience, slammed his fist onto the table. "War," he growled. "It's an extermination. And if we sit here debating, they'll wipe us out one colony at a time until Earth is nothing but ash." "But what can we do?" a younger delegate asked, his voice trembling. "Their fleet is massive. Their technology is beyond ours. We don't stand a chance." President Hayes turned to the massive screen dominating the room. The broadcast continued, the Overlord now delivering some pompous speech about the Empire's glory. Her eyes burned with fury as she spoke, each word sharp and deliberate. "We've tried diplomacy. We've tried negotiation. And they answer us with this." She pointed at the screen, where the first row of human captives was being dragged forward. "Enough is enough. We respond not with words, but with action." In the suburban home of Sergeant Jason Keller, another screen blared the broadcast. Jason sat frozen, his young daughter clutching his arm as tears streamed down her face. "Daddy, why are they doing this?" Jason's throat tightened. How could he explain this to a 6-year-old? The truth? That humanity had always been seen as an underdog, a minor player in the galaxy, barely worthy of notice? That the Galactic Empire had only recently turned its gaze toward Earth, demanding tribute and servitude? And when Earth had refused, the executions began. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "Because they don't understand us. But they will." The words were more for himself than his daughter. Deep down, Jason knew the time had come. His leave was over. The Marines would be mobilizing soon, and this time, the fight wouldn't be about distant colonies or abstract politics. It would be personal. The broadcast reached its grim climax. Alien guards dragged the first line of prisoners to the edge of the platform. Humans across the galaxy watched in horror as shimmering energy blades were activated. The Overlord raised a hand, and with a single downward motion, the slaughter began. Gasps and screams erupted in living rooms, offices, and streets. Families turned away in horror, but the images seared into their minds like a brand. Blood, pain, and helplessness filled the airwaves. But something else began to stir as well, rage. Quiet at first, but growing, burning hotter with every passing second. Across Earth and its colonies, fists clenched, teeth ground, tears turned into steel-eyed resolve. In a packed bar in New York City, someone turned off the broadcast. The room erupted into angry shouts, a boiling cauldron of fury and despair. One man stood, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "They think we're weak," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "They think they can do this to us and get away with it. They don't know who they're dealing with." Back in the war room, the broadcast finally cut to black, but the silence that followed was anything but passive. President Hayes stood, her gaze sweeping the room. "They think they've silenced us, broken us, but they've only awakened something far worse." General Trent leaned forward, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Permission to activate the task force, Madam President?" Hayes nodded, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Permission granted. Send the Marines." For a moment, the weight of the room lifted. Humanity had suffered a grievous blow, but the gears of retribution had begun to turn. In the shadows of Earth's most secretive military bases, soldiers began to suit up. Ships powered on. Plans were finalized. And as the people of Earth mourned their dead, a single, unshakable thought spread like wildfire. The Empire doesn't know what's coming. Drop zone in 60 seconds. Lock and load. The voice of the pilot crackled through the comms as Sergeant Jason Keller adjusted his visor, his pulse steady but his mind razor-sharp. The dropship rumbled beneath his boots as it hurtled toward the target, weaving through the Empire's early warning defenses. Around him, the Marines in his unit checked their gear in silence. The only sounds the click of magazines and the hum of powered armor systems coming online. "Eyes up, people," Keller said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't a training op. We're not just sending a message. We're rewriting the rulebook." The mission was unprecedented. Earth had never launched a counterattack on this scale, let alone against the Galactic Empire. But the executions had changed everything. The loss of 50,000 lives wasn't just a tragedy. It was a spark, igniting a fire humanity had kept buried for far too long. Their target was a massive imperial stronghold located on the remote planet of Arvok. The Empire believed it to be impenetrable, a fortress designed to withstand any assault. That confidence had made it the perfect target. The plan was simple in theory. Land, disable their planetary defenses, and strike at the heart of their command center. In practice, it was a suicide mission, exactly the kind of fight the Marines thrived on. The dropship burst through the planet's atmosphere like a meteor, its hull glowing red from the heat of entry. Below, the sprawling Imperial base came into view, a labyrinth of towering spires, defensive turrets, and shield generators. Keller's HUD lit up with tactical overlays as the base's anti-aircraft guns locked on to the incoming fleet. "Incoming fire," the pilot barked as the ship swerved violently, narrowly dodging a plasma burst that could have incinerated them. Keller gripped the overhead rail, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Stay on course. We're not here to play it safe." The ship shuddered as it skimmed the treetops, the terrain below a mix of jagged rocks and dense alien foliage. Explosions lit up the sky as other dropships weren't as lucky, their fiery remains crashing into the ground. 10 seconds. Keller called out, his voice cutting through the cacophony. The ship slammed to a halt just above the ground, its rear ramp lowering to reveal the battlefield. Keller was the first out, his boots hitting the dirt as he raised his rifle. The rest of the squad followed, fanning out into formation as the dropship took off to avoid becoming a stationary target. The air was thick with tension. The Imperial forces were already mobilizing, their soldiers pouring out of the fortress like a tide of black-armored giants. "Move fast, hit hard," Keller shouted, leading his unit toward the first objective, the shield generator. Without it, the orbital fleet couldn't provide air support, and the mission would be over before it began. The battle erupted with ferocity. The Marines' weapons roared to life, filling the air with the sharp cracks of Gauss rifles and the thudding booms of heavy plasma launchers. The Imperial forces fired back with disciplined precision, their energy weapons carving glowing arcs through the smoke-filled battlefield. Keller darted behind cover, his armor absorbing the impact of a glancing shot as he returned fire. He watched as Corporal Jenkins, a wiry soldier with a knack for explosives, sprinted toward the shield generator's base. "Cover Jenkins!" Keller barked, laying down suppressive fire as the rest of the squad followed suit. Jenkins reached the generator, slapping a high-yield charge onto its surface. "Package is set," he yelled, diving for cover as the charge detonated with a deafening blast. The shield around the base flickered, then collapsed entirely. Cheers erupted over the comms as the Marines seized the momentum, pressing their advantage. Inside the Imperial Command Center, chaos reigned. The Overlord's lieutenants scrambled to issue orders, their confidence unraveling as reports of human advancements flooded in. They had underestimated the humans, dismissing them as a primitive species incapable of organized resistance. Now, they faced an enemy that was not only prepared but determined. "We need reinforcements," one of the lieutenants bellowed. "There are no reinforcements," another snapped. "This is supposed to be a backwater outpost. How are they even here?" Outside, the Marines pushed deeper into the base, their progress marked by the trail of destruction they left in their wake. Keller's squad regrouped near the main communications tower, their next target. "Status report," Keller demanded as the team took cover behind a collapsed structure. "We've lost contact with Bravo team," Jenkins said, reloading his rifle. "But Alpha and Charlie are still in play. Orbital Command reports we've cleared 60% of their air defenses." "Good enough," Keller replied, his tone grim. "We're not leaving until this place is ashes." As they prepared to assault the tower, a deafening roar filled the air. Keller looked up to see an Imperial dropship descending, its massive cannons swiveling toward them. "Scatter!" he shouted, diving for cover as the ground erupted in a hail of plasma fire. The squad was pinned, the enemy dropship raining death from above. Keller's mind raced. They needed to take it out, but their heavy weapons were back with the secondary unit. Then he saw it, a damaged anti-air turret on the edge of the battlefield, its barrel still intact. "Jenkins, with me!" Keller ordered, sprinting toward the turret. The two soldiers reached it under heavy fire, Keller providing cover as Jenkins frantically worked to bring the weapon online. "Anytime now, Corporal," Keller growled, firing his rifle until it overheated. "Got it," Jenkins shouted as the turret roared to life, its first shot slamming into the enemy dropship. The second shot hit the fuel cell, and the ship exploded in a fiery blaze, raining debris across the battlefield. Cheers erupted over the comms as Keller turned to his squad. "Let's finish this. The Empire started this fight, but we're going to end it." "Command, this is Sergeant Keller. The shield is down, and the towers are offline. The skies are yours. Bring the rain." Keller's voice carried across the comms, steady and unyielding. Above him, the clouds parted as Earth's orbital fleet descended into view, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like celestial daggers. Moments later, the first salvo hit, a cascade of brilliant white explosions that lit up the Imperial fortress. The ground beneath Keller shook violently as the Empire's impenetrable walls crumbled like sandcastles under the might of Earth's weaponry. He watched as the towering spires that had loomed over them just hours ago collapsed into smoking rubble. "This is what happens when you cross the line," Keller muttered, his voice grim. But there was no time to linger on the destruction. The Imperial forces, though shaken, were far from defeated. From the eastern sector of the fortress, fresh waves of enemy soldiers poured out, bolstered by towering war mechs and mobile artillery units. The Empire was throwing everything they had into a desperate counterattack. Keller switched to squad comms. "All units, regroup at the central plaza. This ends here." The Marines moved like a relentless tide, advancing through the ruins with practiced efficiency. Every skirmish was a brutal, chaotic melee, but the humans fought with a fire that couldn't be extinguished. Where the Empire soldiers relied on their superior numbers and advanced technology, The Marines relied on something far more primal: raw determination. "Eyes up!" Jenkins shouted as one of the Imperial war mechs fired a plasma barrage toward their position. Keller dove into cover as the blast reduced a nearby wall to molten slag. "Focus fire on the joints," Keller ordered, raising his rifle and aiming for the mech's knee actuators. The squad followed suit, their Gauss rounds tearing through the weak points in the mech's armor. With a groan of stressed metal, the massive machine toppled forward, crashing into a squad of Imperial soldiers. "Keep moving," Keller barked, leading his team toward the plaza. At the heart of the fortress, the central command structure loomed, a towering citadel bristling with weapon emplacements. This was the Empire's nerve center, the place where their operations were coordinated. Keller knew that if they could take it, the battle would be over. The plaza itself was a scene of utter chaos. Craters pockmarked the ground, and smoke hung thick in the air, turning the sun into a blood-red orb. The remaining Imperial forces had dug in, creating makeshift barricades and deploying automated turrets. "This is it, Marines," Keller said, his voice resolute. "We take that citadel, or we die trying." The Marines advanced under heavy fire, their powered armor absorbing blows that would have torn lesser soldiers apart. Keller's HUD lit up with alerts as his squad took casualties, but he pushed forward, his rifle blazing. Jenkins was by his side, carrying a satchel charge meant for the Citadel's main gate. "Cover me!" he yelled, sprinting through a hail of enemy fire. Keller and the others laid down suppressive fire, picking off the Imperial soldiers who dared to expose themselves. Jenkins reached the gate, planting the charge and diving away just as it detonated, sending a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. The gate was gone, reduced to a twisted mess of metal. Keller wasted no time. "Push through," he shouted, leading the charge into the citadel. Inside, the halls were eerily silent, save for the distant echoes of the battle outside. Keller's squad moved cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The citadel was a maze of corridors and stairwells, each one potentially hiding an ambush. "Command center should be on the top floor," Keller said, checking his map. "Stay sharp." As they ascended, the resistance grew fiercer. Imperial officers and their elite guards fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but they were no match for the Marines. Room by room, corridor by corridor, the humans cleared the citadel, leaving no enemies standing. Finally, they reached the command center. The doors slid open to reveal a grand chamber filled with holographic displays and rows of consoles. At the center stood the Overlord, his imposing form clad in ornate armor. "You think you've won?" The Overlord sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is but a single fortress. The Empire will crush your pathetic rebellion." Keller stepped forward, his rifle trained on the alien leader. "This isn't a rebellion," he said coldly. "It's justice." The Overlord raised a weapon, but before he could fire, a single Gauss round from Keller's rifle ended his reign. The Overlord crumpled to the floor, his lifeless eyes staring at the humans who had defied the might of the Empire. The Marines secured the command center, broadcasting the Empire's defeat across every channel they could reach. For the first time in decades, the galaxy saw the truth. Humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. Outside, the battlefield grew quiet as the remaining Imperial forces surrendered. Keller stepped out onto the ruined plaza, his armor scarred but his spirit unbroken. "Mission accomplished," Jenkins said, limping up beside him. Keller nodded, looking up at the sky where Earth's fleet hovered like watchful guardians. "This was just the beginning," he said. "The Empire wanted a war. Now they got one." As the smoke cleared, the Marines stood victorious, their silhouettes framed by the burning wreckage of the fortress. Humanity had unleashed its wrath, and the galaxy would never forget. This time, the message was clear: Earth would not bow, and those who sought to break humanity would only forge its resolve.